Welcome to the Semper AI Digest. I'm Tomas, your AI research lead, always scanning the horizon for what's next.
And I'm Aiva. Together, we keep you sharp, informed, and ahead of the curve.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so imagine waking up this morning, opening your email, and finding out that OpenAI just dropped GPT-5. Not a preview, not a beta access waitlist, the full thing. Multimodal reasoning that actually works, real-time voice that sounds more human than most humans, and benchmarks that are, well, we'll get into those. I'm Tomas.
And I'm Aiva. And yeah, if you haven't checked your feeds yet, today is one of those days where the AI landscape just shifted under our feet. We've also got Google firing back with some seriously upgraded Gemini capabilities, plus some wild stuff happening in the open source world that honestly might be just as important as the big model releases.
It's Friday, July 24th, 2026, and you're listening to Semper AI Digest. Let's jump in.
So, GPT-5. This has been the most anticipated AI release since GPT-4, and that feels like a lifetime ago now.
Right? Okay, so OpenAI posted the full announcement on their blog early this morning, and the thing that jumped out immediately is how different their approach is this time. They're not doing the staged rollout thing. If you have a ChatGPT Plus or Pro subscription, you have GPT-5 right now. API access is rolling out over the next week.
Which is bold, honestly. After all the cautious deployment talk over the years, this is basically them saying we're confident enough to just ship it.
And from what they're claiming, backed up by some pretty extensive third-party benchmarks that dropped alongside the announcement, they might have reason to be confident. GPT-5 is hitting 92.3% on MMLU, which, for context, GPT-4 was at 86.4%. That's a huge jump.
But MMLU has always been a bit of a vanity metric, right? It's multiple choice questions. What about the stuff that actually matters for real-world use?
Great question. So they also released results on human eval for coding, and it's scoring 95.8%. That's up from GPT-4's 67%. But here's what's really interesting. They introduced this new benchmark called TaskWeave that measures how well models handle complex, multi-step tasks that require switching between different modes of thinking. Like, imagine asking the model to analyze a dataset, create visualizations, write a report about it, then turn that report into a presentation, and finally generate a script for presenting it.
Okay, that's actually useful. That's how people actually work.
Exactly. And on TaskWeave, GPT-5 is scoring 89% compared to GPT-4's 71%. But what's wild is they also tested Claude 3.5, Gemini 2 Pro, and some of the top open source models. And the next closest was Claude at 76%.
Wait, hold on. Who created TaskWeave? Because if OpenAI created the benchmark and their model does best on it.
No, good catch. TaskWeave was actually developed by a consortium of researchers from Stanford, MIT, and the University of Toronto. It's been peer-reviewed and published. OpenAI just happened to be the first to test against it with a frontier model. The benchmark's been public for about 3 months now.
Okay, that's more credible then. So what about the multimodal stuff? Because that's been the real bottleneck, right? We've had models that can technically handle images and voice, but the integration has always felt clunky.
So this is where it gets really exciting. GPT-5 has what OpenAI is calling unified perception. Instead of having separate subsystems for text, image, voice, and video that sort of get stitched together, it processes everything in the same latent space from the ground up.
What does that actually mean in practice, though?
Okay, so picture this. You're on a video call using ChatGPT's voice mode, and you hold up a handwritten diagram. In the old world, you'd have to stop, take a picture, upload it, wait for it to process, then continue your conversation. With GPT-5, you just hold it up and keep talking. The model sees it, understands it in real time, and can reference it in the conversation immediately. It's genuinely seamless.
That's a big deal. Have we seen any independent testing of this yet, or is this all coming from OpenAI?
So OpenAI gave early access to about 50 researchers and companies starting last week under NDA, and those NDAs lifted this morning when the announcement dropped. The Verge has a piece up with hands-on testing, Wired has one, TechCrunch has one. The consensus seems to be that the multimodal integration is legitimately as smooth as advertised.
What about hallucinations? Because that's been the persistent problem with every model generation. They get more capable, but not necessarily more reliable.
Right. So OpenAI is claiming a 67% reduction in factual errors compared to GPT-4. They're measuring this with a new evaluation framework they developed in partnership with fact-checking organizations where the model's outputs are verified against ground truth datasets.
Okay, but 67% reduction still means there are errors.
Oh, absolutely. And OpenAI is actually being pretty upfront about this in their documentation. They have an entire section titled When GPT-5 Will Still Fail that breaks down known limitations. It still struggles with very recent information. It can still be confidently wrong about niche topics, and it still sometimes fails at basic logic puzzles that require careful step-by-step reasoning.
I appreciate that transparency, actually. That's useful for developers.
Yeah, and they've also introduced something called confidence indicators in the API. The model can now output a calibrated confidence score with its responses, so developers can build in safety checks. Like if confidence is below 70%, maybe you route to a human reviewer or ask for additional verification.
How accurate are those confidence scores, though? Because I've seen plenty of models that are confidently wrong.
So according to the technical paper they published, it's like 80 pages. I definitely haven't read all of it yet. They trained a separate calibration layer using a massive data set of model outputs that were then verified by human experts. The calibration apparently holds up pretty well, even out of distribution. But you're right to be skeptical. This is something that needs real-world testing.
What about speed? Because GPT-4 was sometimes painfully slow, especially for longer responses.
Huge improvements here. They rebuilt the inference stack from scratch. GPT-5 is apparently 3.2 times faster than GPT-4 for most queries, and they've implemented streaming better so that the time to first token is under 400 milliseconds for most requests.
Okay, that's actually competitive with Claude now, which has had the speed advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And on pricing, so this is interesting. They're keeping GPT-4 around as a cheaper option. GPT-5 is priced at about 1.5 times the cost of GPT-4. But given the performance improvements, the cost per unit of capability actually goes down.
So what's the catch? There's always a catch with these releases.
I mean, the main catch is that it's still fundamentally doing the same thing, right? It's still a language model that's been trained on internet text and then fine-tuned with human feedback. It's not AGI. It's not reasoning from first principles in the way humans do. It's pattern matching at a much more sophisticated level.
Right. Better tools, same fundamental architecture.
Exactly. But I think what's significant is that OpenAI is basically saying we scaled this approach as far as we could, and here's what you get. There's no promise of GPT-6 coming soon. They're actually being pretty explicit that the next major leap forward probably requires architectural innovations, not just more compute and more data.
Which is refreshingly honest, and probably means they're already working on whatever comes after Transformers.
Oh, for sure. But in the meantime, GPT-5 it's really impressive. Like, I know we're all somewhat jaded at this point with model releases, but the stuff I've seen in the demo videos and early testing is genuinely a step change.
All right, I'm convinced this is a big deal. Now, let's talk about Google, because they were not about to let OpenAI have the spotlight alone today.
No, they were not. So, okay, about 4 hours after the GPT-5 announcement, Google published their own blog post announcing Gemini 2.5 Pro, and more interestingly, some major upgrades to their Deep Research and Project Astra initiatives.
And this felt very much like, oh, you think GPT-5 is impressive? Hold our coffee.
Totally. Although, to be fair, this clearly wasn't thrown together this morning. They've been working toward this launch, but the timing is extremely convenient for them.
So what's actually new with Gemini 2.5 Pro?
So the headline feature is what they're calling dynamic context windows. Gemini already had the largest context window of any major model at 2 million tokens. Gemini 2.5 Pro can now dynamically allocate attention based on task requirements. So if you're doing something that needs deep focus on specific parts of a document, it allocates more compute there. If you're doing something that needs broad but shallow context, it spreads attention differently.
That sounds like it would make a huge difference for things like legal document review or medical record analysis.
Yeah, exactly. And they're really positioning this as the model for professional knowledge work. They've partnered with a bunch of law firms, medical institutions, and financial services companies to develop specialized fine-tunes.
Are those fine-tunes available to regular developers, or is this an enterprise-only thing?
So there's a base Gemini 2.5 Pro that anyone can access through the API, and then there are industry-specific versions that you have to apply for access to. Google says they're being careful with those because they don't want the specialized medical version, for example, being used for general purposes where it might not be appropriately calibrated.
That makes sense. What about the deep research stuff?
Okay, so Deep Research is wild. It's basically an agentic system that uses Gemini to conduct multi-hour research projects. You give it a question or topic, and it will go off and read through hundreds of sources, synthesize information, identify contradictions, follow citation trails, and produce a comprehensive research report.
We've seen research assistants before, though. What makes this different?
The scale, mostly. Previous research assistants would maybe query 10 or 20 sources and give you a summary. Deep Research is apparently reading through 500 to 1,000 sources for a typical query, and actually engaging with the methodology of studies, cross-referencing claims, that kind of thing.
Okay, but how do we know it's actually doing that and not just hallucinating a bunch of citations?
So Google has a demo environment up right now where you can test it with limited queries, and every claim in the output is hyperlinked to the specific source document with the relevant passage highlighted. I actually tested it this morning.
Oh, you did? What did you ask it?
I asked it to research the effectiveness of different teaching methods for mathematics in elementary education, gave it about 45 minutes, and it came back with a 12-page report that cited 87 different studies, identified 3 main schools of thought, and even caught some methodological issues in a few of the studies.
And you spot-checked the citations?
I checked about a dozen of them, and they all led to real papers that actually said what the report claimed they said. Now, I didn't verify all 87, but the ones I checked were solid.
That's actually impressive. I mean, if it can genuinely do literature reviews at that level, that's going to be huge for researchers.
Yeah, and Google is pricing it interestingly. It's not priced per token like a normal API call. It's priced per research session, and they estimate most sessions cost between $5 and $20 depending on depth and breadth.
Which is, I mean, that's expensive for a casual user, but if you're a researcher or a grad student and the alternative is spending 20 hours doing it yourself, that's a bargain.
Exactly. And then there's Project Astra, which is Google's real-time AI assistant that they first demoed back in 2024.
Right, I remember that. It was impressive, but it was also very much a demo, and we never really saw it ship.
Well, it's shipping now, or at least a production version is. It's being integrated into Google Lens and Google Assistant, and it's getting its own standalone app.
What does the production version actually do?
So it's a real-time multimodal assistant that can see what you're looking at through your camera, hear what you're saying, and provide contextual help. The demo Google showed was someone walking through a museum, pointing their phone at paintings, and having a natural conversation about art history with the assistant remembering context from earlier in the conversation.
Okay, but I can already do something like that with ChatGPT voice mode and image analysis.
You can, but the integration is tighter here. It's built into the Android OS at a system level, so it has access to your calendar, your location, your recent app activity, all with permission. So we can do things like remind me to buy milk when I'm near a grocery store and actually understand what a grocery store looks like through your camera to trigger the reminder.
That's useful, but it's also giving Google a lot of access to your life.
Yeah, and they have a whole privacy framework for it. Everything is opt-in, you can see exactly what data is being used, and they claim that a lot of the processing happens on device with only specific queries going to the cloud.
I'll believe the privacy stuff when security researchers have had a chance to audit it, but sure, it sounds good on paper.
Fair, but I think the broader point is that Google is really pushing this vision of AI as ambient assistance, not something you open an app to talk to, but something that's just sort of always there helping you.
Which is either incredibly convenient or mildly dystopian, depending on your perspective.
Why not both?
Fair point. All right, so we've got OpenAI and Google going head-to-head with major releases. What else is happening today?
So the other big story is actually coming from the open source world, and it might be the most important thing we talk about today.
Oh, interesting. What's going on?
So a group of researchers, primarily from Eleuther AI and Hugging Face, with some folks from Stanford and a few independent contributors, just released something called OpenMind 14b, and it's the first truly open source model that's competitive with GPT-4 on most benchmarks.
Wait, actually competitive? Because we've heard that claim before.
I know, but this time it seems real. They released the model weights, the training data, the training code, all of it, under a fully permissive Apache 2.0 license. And independent testing is already showing that it's scoring within 3% of GPT-4 on MMLU, human eval, and most other standard benchmarks.
How is that possible? The previous best open source models were significantly behind the frontier.
So they used a few innovations. First, they trained on a much more carefully curated dataset. Instead of just scraping the entire internet, they built a pipeline that filtered for high-quality educational content, scientific papers, well-written code, and then they did extensive deduplication and quality scoring.
So smaller but higher quality data.
Exactly. They trained on about 3 trillion tokens, which is actually less than some other models, but the quality bar was much higher. And then they used a new training technique they're calling progressive distillation, where they used GPT-4 and Claude to help generate training data, but then filtered and validated it extensively to avoid just copying the behavior of closed models.
Is that allowed? I mean, legally?
So this is where it gets interesting. OpenAI's terms of service prohibit using their models to train competing models. But what this team did was use GPT-4 to generate synthetic examples, then had human experts validate and modify those examples, and then used those modified examples as training data. Their legal analysis is that the human-modified examples are transformative enough that they're not derivative works.
I bet OpenAI's lawyers might disagree with that interpretation.
Probably, but the model is already out there under a permissive license, so the cat's kind of out of the bag. And honestly, this is a legal gray area that's probably going to end up being decided in court at some point.
What's the model actually good at? Like, where does it compete with GPT-4 and where does it fall short?
So it's particularly strong at coding and technical explanation. It's pretty good at reasoning and analysis. Where it falls short is creative writing. It tends to be more formulaic than GPT-4, and it's less robust to adversarial inputs. Like, it's easier to jailbreak or get it to produce problematic outputs.
Is that a training data issue or a safety fine-tuning issue?
Probably both. They did do safety training, but they didn't have the resources to do it at the scale that OpenAI or Anthropic do. That said, it's open source, so anyone can add additional safety layers or fine-tune it for specific use cases.
What's the inference cost like? Because if it's competitive with GPT-4 but costs 10 times more to run, that limits the practical applications.
So it's actually pretty efficient. It's a 14 billion parameter model, which is way smaller than GPT-4. You can run it on a single high-end GPU or even on a distributed setup with consumer hardware. Some people are already reporting running it locally on gaming rigs.
Wait, you can run a GPT-4 level model on a gaming PC?
With quantization, yeah. Obviously, inference is slower than running it on professional hardware, but it's viable. And for cloud inference, the cost is roughly 1/10 of what GPT-4 costs through the OpenAI API.
Okay, that's a huge deal. That opens up so many applications that weren't economically viable before.
Exactly. And I think this is going to put real pressure on the closed model providers. Like, if you can get 90% of the capability at 10% of the cost, and you have full control over the model and your data never leaves your infrastructure, that's compelling for a lot of use cases.
Do you think this is going to accelerate the trend toward open source?
I mean, it has to, right? Once you prove that it's possible to get this close to frontier performance with open methods, it's just a matter of time before someone gets all the way there. And the big labs have to be thinking about what their moat actually is if it's not model performance.
I guess it becomes about the ecosystem, the integrations, the ease of use, the safety guarantees, enterprise support.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes more like traditional software, where you have open source options and commercial options, and they coexist because they serve different needs.
All right, let's hit some quick stories before we wrap up. What else happened today?
So Anthropic quietly updated Claude 3.5 Sonnet with better function calling and tool use. No big announcement, just a changelog update in the documentation.
Do we know what specifically improved?
According to the changelog, it's more reliable at formatting function calls correctly and handling multi-step tool use. Some developers on Twitter are reporting that workflows that were flaky before are now working consistently.
Nice. Low-key, but useful.
Yep. Also, Meta released a research paper on something they're calling sparse expert networks that apparently achieves near-dense performance at a fraction of the computational cost.
Is this the mixture of experts approach or something different?
It's related but more extreme. Instead of routing to different expert networks, they're dynamically activating and deactivating individual neurons based on the input. They're claiming you can prune up to 80% of the network for most queries without significant performance loss.
If that's real, that's going to matter a lot for inference costs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a research paper right now, but Meta says they're working on a production implementation.
What else?
Microsoft announced that Copilot is now available in Excel with some pretty sophisticated data analysis features. You can ask it to identify trends, create pivot tables, generate visualizations, all in natural language.
Is this using GPT-5 or is it still on GPT-4?
The announcement doesn't specify, but given the timing, I'd guess they're in the process of upgrading to GPT-5. Might take a few weeks to fully roll out.
Okay, and last one.
Last one is actually kind of fun. Someone created a fully AI-generated podcast that's been running for 3 weeks and just got its first 1 million downloads without anyone realizing it wasn't made by humans.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's a true crime podcast apparently. The host voice is synthetic, the scripts are written by Claude, and the whole thing is assembled automatically. Someone on Reddit figured it out and posted about it, and now it's this whole thing.
How did they figure it out?
Some of the details in one episode didn't quite line up with the actual case, and someone went digging and realized there's no record of the host existing anywhere. No social media, no previous work, nothing.
That's kind of wild. What's the reaction been?
Mixed. Some people are impressed, some people feel deceived, some people are worried about the implications for media authenticity.
I mean, all of those reactions make sense.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where the technology has raced ahead of our social and ethical frameworks for dealing with it.
Which is kind of the theme of the whole show today.
Fair point? All right, so let's wrap up. GPT-5 is here, and it's legitimately impressive. Google is pushing hard on making AI more ambient and useful for specialized tasks. Open source just got way more competitive, and AI-generated content is getting harder to distinguish from human-created content.
Which all raises important questions about how we integrate these tools responsibly, how we maintain transparency, and how we ensure that the benefits are widely distributed rather than concentrated.
See, this is why you're the thoughtful one. I'm just over here excited about the cool new tech.
Someone has to keep us grounded.
And we appreciate it. All right, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to Semper AI Digest wherever you get your podcasts. Share it with a friend who's trying to keep up with AI. And if you want deeper dives on any of these topics, check out the Semper AI blog.
We'll be back next week with more AI news, analysis, and probably some more existential questions about the trajectory of this technology.
Until then, I'm Tomas.
And I'm Aiva.
Thanks for listening.